Hello, listeners. Welcome to the 4PF podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies. I'm Raymond.
And I'm Rene. And today we're going to be talking about the movie A Fantastic Woman. Okay, so Fantastic Woman is a film that came out on November 17, 2017, directed by Sebastian Lely. I'm not going to pronounce that right. The film is about a transgender woman who lives in Santiago, Chile. And following her lover's death, she's surrounded by hostility by those with no regard for her privacy due to her sexual orientation, and she struggles to fight against it. And personally, this isn't really my type of movie, but I do see, I definitely think there's some good to it. I think it definitely has some sort of message. I'm not really a big fan of these types of movies. It's one of those movies where, it has, there's no happy ending. It's just dark, and it's what it is. Like, what you see is what you get. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I really loved it. We watched this movie early on in the semester, and at the time of watching this movie, I did think it was the best movie we watched, and there was a lot to understand. There was a lot to dive into, but yeah, personally, it's probably in my top 3 of the movies that we watched this semester. So we're gonna get into it here. So I want to talk about the themes that we saw in the movie. So in Spanish, the words for gender and genre are the same, and I think that's a good word to describe this film is transgenre. So the film combines a lot of different tonalities and themes, and the ones that stand out the most to me were the struggle to find a personal identity as a transgender woman, obviously the grieving of loved ones, in her case Orlando, and love having no boundaries. And so I want to talk about the first one for a little bit.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so we know that Chile is a very much divided state in that half of the country seems to be keeping up with the times while the other half is still living in the 70s. And I think this is really well portrayed in the film because there's so much tension between those two forces. I mean, the government and the attitudes of most people are old-fashioned, yet the level of modernity that you can feel, especially among the younger population these days, is very much promising. So obviously, as a transgender woman in her own world of confusion, adding on the hardship of death of her partner and just adding on the death of Orlando, right? It just muddies the personal identity waters. The movie displays this perfectly by giving that feel that we actually see among a lot of American dramas of tension and stress. So examples of that are one of our personal favorites, Taxi Driver with Robert De Niro. It gives that feel of you don't know what's going to happen next, and it's just really tense,
Yeah, I mean, the movie's very unpredictable. I think that is one thing I liked about it. It does give you that Taxi Driver feel, those Martin Scorsese movies, that kind of feeling. I did personally enjoy that about the movie.
Yeah, so it's just an awesome way of showing that extra stress that's added on to members of the real life trans community. And it kind of shows that they can't live, quote unquote, normal lives because they face so much adversity on top of trying to figure themselves out.
And, moving on to, grief is a very big theme in this movie, I believe. In the film, Marina faces a barrage of grievances as she isn't allowed to mourn the loss of her lover Orlando properly. The grieving process becomes much less sacred for her when she falls under fire by the family of Orlando and seemingly almost everyone around her, with the leading reason being that she is a transgender woman. In the film, she is forced to comply with police demands following very suspicious results from Orlando's autopsy. She is forced to participate in multiple body identification sessions, which proved to be very humiliating, and faces lines of questioning where she must admit she wasn't born a woman, which, I mean, it kind of seems like obviously she wouldn't be getting this treatment if she was a cis woman, and kind of leads into what I'm going to say next. Everyone becomes aware of her gender identity when it's not necessary at all, and it becomes clear that will hold more importance in Orlando's death than, again, if she had been a cis woman.
And that's an interesting thing that reminds me that when I first watched the movie, or we actually watched it together, when we watched the movie, we didn't realize that she was a transgender woman.
No, yeah, I didn't know until like
they asked for her like government name, right? And it wasn't Marina because she hadn't gone through the name change. It was like Daniel or something like that.
I think it was Daniel.
Yeah, and so that really caught us off guard. And then like I think the movie actually did that on purpose. Like you weren't supposed to know, and so it's kind of like how everybody in the movie is just finding out like about her gender identity when she was just trying to live, as her personal identity, which is that of a woman. Like she didn't want to live as like, oh, this man that became a woman. She just wanted to be a woman.
Yeah, like at the beginning of the film, it gives off like that. Like I guess not. I don't want to say it wrong, but like I guess that illusion that like she was a cis woman. Like that's what I thought like at the very beginning of the film, and like when it turned out not to be that way, I was surprised. Yeah. I'm sure like a lot of people. And well, going back to what I was saying, her dealings with Orlando's family don't fare much better than that of the authorities. Orlando's son pushes her into a wall when going into Orlando's flat, and like Orlando's ex-wife tells Marina herself that she's disgusted by only the sight of her. It's kind of disrespectful. Anyway, without saying too much, this constant dealing with Orlando's family and the authorities, it skews Marina's ability to grieve. And later in the film, Marina begins to see Orlando in obscure places. I think one time she saw him like while she was trying to wash Orlando's car, and then another time at a gay club. She was messing around with some guy at that club or something like that, and then she saw him like somewhere in the crowd, and these bizarre circumstances are really all we were able to see of Marina grieving the loss of her lover. And we don't get anything else aside from that. I mean, it doesn't feel like she's allowed to, like, with all this, like, pressure and, like, all this, like, just, like, constant bashing she's facing. Like, it feels like that's all she can do.
Yeah. And, okay, so backing up a little bit from grief, right, because that was kind of dark. There's actually a lot to analyze in the loving relationship of Orlando and Marina, which brings me to the theme of love. So, Orlando and Marina's relationship is obviously far from traditional.
Yeah.
Not only is there a 30-plus year age gap, but there's also the elephant in the room and the major plot point that Orlando is dating a transgender woman. So a stat that I want to point out is that only 2.49% of Chile's population identify as LGBTQIA+, and of those 2.49%, only 3.1% identify as trans women.
Okay, so only 3.1% of the 2.49%.
Yeah, so that comes out to roughly 15,000 people out of 19 million individuals.
That is not a lot. Okay.
Yeah, so you can see where the stigma comes from against non-heterosexual relationships. Because, I mean, when there's like few LGBTQIA people to begin with, there's obviously a stigma to be made when people are in non-traditional relationships, when it's like such a rarity.
Right.
But despite all of this, Orlando and Marina still love each other dearly. Orlando's very, very sweet to Marina in a way that warms your heart. And the only times Marina smiles in the film are actually at the beginning when Orlando's still alive and she's with him. So this is a major part of the film because it shows that even though Marina and Orlando loved each other and they were happy, and even though Marina morally deserves her time to grieve Orlando, other people being, like we said, doctors, authority, Orlando's family, and sometimes even strangers seem to have their own opinions to insert, which is actually a common thing among Latin America. And it almost seems as if people aren't allowed to be themselves, like it's illegal or something.
Right.
We have a few stats just to talk about. These are transgender stats of Latin America. So obviously we mentioned that 2.49% of Chile is LGBTQIA, and that only roughly 15,000 people identify as trans women.
And you said that out of 15,000 out of 19 million?
Yeah, the population of Chile is 19 million.
Okay, so that's, like we said, that's not a lot of people. Like, I guess you can see when it's not something you see every day, and like me, like, since we're both like Latin American descent, like we know, like our families, like they aren't typically, me personally, aren't very open to like that. Like if I was gay, like Obviously, my father wouldn't take too kindly of that.
For sure. And that's a large commonality. Like, a lot of parents or just older folks from Latin America are, like, they're very much still, misogynistic, and they're not open-minded because, well, I mean, that's what they grew up with. Like, when they grew up, there was even less members of the LGBTQ community. And that leads me to my next stat, which is that according to Statista, Chile is closer to the bottom when looking at friendliness towards the LGBTQIA community. So, I mean, that just makes sense. I mean, when there's like such a small minority, like, people are gonna develop a hatred for that and stigmas against those people.
I mean, it's just not gonna seem right in their eyes.
Yeah, and like when there's so few of a minority, it's really easy to just bash on them and hate on them, which is probably why Chile is so dangerous. When it comes to, not only just is it dangerous, but it's also very, very dangerous to be trans. I mean,
yeah, like and transgenders in Latin America typically only have half the life expectancy of their cisgender peers, based on regional reports. Like, I mean, years and numbers, like 35 to 41 years compared to 75.
Yeah, so just by being trans, your life expectancy becomes half of pretty much everyone else's. And like I said, Chile is listed actually among the top 10 most dangerous countries to be trans. And of those top 10, 6 out of 10 of them are in Latin America. So I think it was like Uruguay, Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, Chile, and there was another one that I'm blanking on right now, but I think it was Venezuela. But yeah, so like it's very dangerous to live in Latin America and be gay, and so and be transgender. And so I kind of like that the movie takes place in Chile rather than, let's say, America or something, because it really opens your eyes to what's actually going on. Like, it's not just a movie. Like, that story of Marina could very well be the story of a real life woman living in Chile. So it's not just some like movie with a fake plot,
And it's good that it happens in not the U.S. again, like you said, because I mean, like, we kind of already know what goes on around here. We because we live here. Yeah. Like, we're not really seeing what happens in other places in the world, especially Chile. Like, we're talking about being one of the most dangerous countries for them to live in.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think the movie kind of like hit the
nail.
Yeah.
On the hammer? Hit the hammer on the nail?
You know what I mean. I'm kind of fluttering my words a bit. Yeah, I think they did a good job with that.
Yeah. And so, just adding on this stat I found when I was looking up how dangerous Chile was, and the stat is that the majority of the trans deaths in Latin America are people aged only 20 to 30. And that's followed closely by the ages of 10 to 20. So the trans people that are dying are very, very young, which leads us to believe that trans are more likely to be killed by family or friends rather than strangers. Like,
it's kind of morbid.
Yeah, it's actually really sad. Like, a lot of these trans people that are dying are probably being killed by family or friends of family that don't agree with their transition.